and we could always change things, edit things later. Well, so welcome to the Myeloma Team podcast. Yolanda and I are excited to welcome today and share this moment with David Emerson. And David, I'm going to talk about in a little bit after this podcast, because I'm going to delete this part out and put in actually a little bit of a background bio. So David, tell us a little bit about your journey, because it actually started back in what I consider the dark ages of multiple myeloma.
Yes.
1994, is that right?
I was diagnosed with actually early stage or pre-multiple myeloma in January of 1994 at the ripe old age of 34. Which is
young, and a youngster too, because the average age still is mid 60s for myeloma diagnosis. So
That's
you
true.
were a youngster.
That's true. Though it does seem like I'm coming across younger and younger myeloma patients.
True. And nobody's been able to explain to me, at least, whether that's due to increased awareness or whether there's actually an increase in people with the disease or just a happenstance of diagnosis, because it is starting, and I do know this to be true, that there are many internists and primary care physicians that are putting that into their physical at later ages, after the age of 50, I think now, 45, 50, which still wouldn't have done anything for you or me or Yolanda, but yeah.
That's great to hear.
It is.
Lots of studies come out about how many 3% of the population over 60 that has MGUS.
Monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined specificity.
Undetermined significance.
Oh, significant.
Significance.
Almost.
I was almost there.
Yes. So, and as we all know, catching cancer earlier and being able to manage it is a good thing for all of us. The only drawback with myeloma is that we have to live with the psychology of having terrible cancer. Sure.
Yep.
So in any case, I was diagnosed. For the first, I'd say 4 years, I did exactly what my oncologist recommended, prescribed, told me to do, which would be radiation to the site. Induction therapy, which is the fancy way of saying the beginning therapy that all myeloma patients undergo, and then an autologous stem cell transplant in December of 95.
So you actually had an auto in 95. Wow, that's really, I think that's probably really early in those days. That's pretty dynamic.
It was early. At the time, it was considered experimental therapy, which in theory, your health insurance doesn't cover. But the guy that ran the program at the University Hospital here in Cleveland wrote letters and knew how to get things covered. So
that's fantastic, though. I mean, seriously, because again, that's groundbreaking, and I didn't hear a lot of people having those sorts of experiences until they passed the stem cell initiative, which was probably 10 years after that.
Before me, or before 94, the usual standard of care therapy was melphalan prednisone. You talk about dark ages. Oh. That's what they did.
I've had melphalan. Oh, yeah, right. That's brutal.
Yeah. So. At the time, I thought a stem cell transplant was potentially curative. I thought, this is great. I knew it was a lot of chemo, but I was sort of young and tough, thinking I was, macho. So I can take it. Now, the history tells us otherwise. And in any event, left the hospital, relapsed less than a year later, palliative radiation. We can talk about that in a second. Basically, just to manage my bone pain until a little less than a year later, my oncologist had a discussion with me that we myeloma patients never want to hear. There's nothing more we can do for you. Well-meaning oncologists, smart, tried everything, threw everything at me but the kitchen sink. It just didn't work. And that happens in a percentage of patients. In any case, Being
It's
young,
hard to hear.
that was a bad. I was with my wife at the time, and that day didn't go well.
No, I imagine not.
But young and otherwise, we didn't have a mortgage. We didn't have any kids yet. We didn't. Life was very different back in. It was September of 1997. My wife actually is smarter than me, and she was much more high tech, and got on the internet looking. While the internet is a fraction then of what it is now, still she was able to find a place, treatment. I didn't understand anything about alternative therapies. Sure. I didn't understand the controversy. I didn't know anything about that. I just knew that I couldn't sit and do nothing. Mm-hmm. So, and I also knew that I didn't want to go to Tijuana. I didn't want to go to Switzerland, Germany, whatever. We went to the Burzynski Research Institute in Houston, Texas. Started in early November of that year. Antineoplaston therapy. 10 months intravenous, 7 months capsules, reached remission, bones healed. I never ever want to say I'm cured. I'll say I'm in complete remission, and I work at it. We'll talk about nutrition in a second. I work at all of that stuff.
And I want to hear more about the Burzynski Institute as well. But so, what year again was that you went to Burzynski?
I started in the therapy on November 3rd of 1997. So 10 months of the liquid. It's just like the chemo I had undergone. There was a port into my vein under a clavicle. Same thing.
Sure.
So actually, I did the therapy here in Cleveland, where I live. Once a month, I would go down to the clinic to get more therapy. I had to have a doctor. I had to do monthly MRIs, basically check all the blood work that you guys are used to. Sure. I had to do just to see what antineoplaston therapy was doing to me. Can I talk about Burzynski for just a second?
Yes, please.
First and foremost, there's no one more controversial in the world of cancer care. You can be in a room. If any of you listening, ask your oncologist, you're liable to get a right cross. That some people will say he's the devil incarnate, though some people will say he's a god. All I know is I underwent the therapy after 4 years of extensive conventional therapies, which didn't work. And I reached remission in 17 months.
So did Burzynski, was he the one that sort of started with the, as you call them, the antineoplastons? Is that right?
He developed it. He invented it. He basically discovered it.
Sure. Sorry. Right. Fair enough. Yeah.
He would say there's a component in blood and urine that peptides, and that he was able to isolate these peptides. He figured out that cancer patients have an absence of these peptides. Healthy people have plenty of these peptides. So he thought, we'll give these peptides to cancer survivors and see how they do. The more challenges. Myeloma is rare, and there are very few people that have even tried antineoplaston therapy at the Burzynski Research Institute. So it's very difficult for us to get good information, certainly no clinical trials.
Right, so whether it works or doesn't work is basically based on whether somebody survives or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And going and to make things worse, it's all out of pocket. It's not going to be covered by your insurance because it's experimental. So to pay for it out of pocket, I figured out that it was just about the same cost as my autologous stem cell transplant, but my transplant was covered
by insurance, right?
Right.
So now also get a loan from my parents. Again, a different time of life when we had no debt. Things were different. So in the meantime, I spent a lot of time exercise, nutrition, supplementation, all of the things that I think that studies will say are good for myeloma patients, either good for your immune system or anti-angiogenic that fight myeloma. I do. think everyone should. I think every myeloma patient should. Well, everyone should. So briefly, that's my myeloma story.
That's a lot. It's interesting. I mean, and not that this is directly comparable, but partly because I think that I just read it, and I already told Yolanda this a while ago, that I read the The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks.
I love that book.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So it talks about the HeLa cells, of course, the perpetual. But the use of them, of course, has been controversial over years. Not that they haven't been valuable, because they've definitely been valuable. They can certainly attract the value, you put aside what it's done to that family and how it's changed the world and so forth. But it's interesting to make the comparisons with how they take something like that and how there were physicians back in the mid 50s and I guess into the 60s that were still I'm sorry, the word is eugenicists, is that right? That basically are trying to separate people not seeing the value in people that are not white, basically. And so they use those on people, on Jews and Black people and so forth. And they tested different substances on this. And so what I can see, especially a concern within the medical community, especially during when Stanislaw Burzynski was sort of coming in, not being from this country also, and part of sort of the, I would assume the medical mainstream, that they might see him as somebody who's experimenting on people unnecessarily or without sort of the authority of the medical community as a whole. And I can see that that'd be a danger.
He, to some degree, I can argue both sides.
Sure.
Because I've read
and I'm not arguing one way or the other. I could just sort of see the feeling, the concern.
He's a Polish doctor,
right?
And I don't mean to stereotype. And he's basically giving components of urine and blood, to people, and he's charging for it,
right?
That
considerable sums. Looking on their, just looking at what's been written in articles about them, it generally, and I think even currently, it's between $7,000 and $10,000 a month that patients would be paying for these services, right?
I pay. I'll just again talk about myself.
Sure.
The liquid, the intravenous antineoplastons was $14,000 per month. This would have been 1997.
Holy smokes!
And okay, this is they billed Martha in the head accountant would bill my insurance. It was pretty well understood, unspoken, but understood that at some point my insurance company would stop paying because it's experimental. But Burzynski was using CPT codes, understood how it was chemotherapy, chemical therapy. So they were billing, and so they would charge me for half and my insurance for half. And my insurance paid for a few months, and eventually it was all on me. And the capsules were less $2,000 a month. I paid $1,000. They billed insurance $1,000. So there are huge issues, huge problems. Yet it put me into remission. I mean, to some degree, I tell people I won the myeloma lottery.
Right. So I have a question. So what are the statistics in terms of this type of treatment? Because I've never heard of it until you mentioned it. I mean, I'm just clueless to this whole thing.
Same.
So are there statistics in terms of like the amount of people that have gone into remission or the amount of people that use this particular type of therapy?
Burzynski, to answer your question, there are several answers. Burzynski does publish spreadsheets about success in cancers. The main challenge is there are comparatively few, there are only 20 or 30 myeloma patients. And as we know with oncology, they'll break it into stable, partial remission. There are comparatively few complete remission.
Okay.
I don't know of anyone like me that's been in complete remission for how long? Since 99.
Years.
So yeah, 20 years in complete remission. That's, then I got to figure out what's Burzynski, what's antineoplaston therapy versus what is nutrition and supplementation, curcumin, resveratrol, all those things. And I can't quite come up. But where I'll go off script a little bit here, antineoplastons happen to be particularly effective at pediatric brain tumors, of all things. So certain cancers, it's more efficacious. Myeloma, lymphoma, leukemias, it's very difficult to come up with information. And I'll go on record, I don't like anecdotal testimonials. One person saying, oh, it's great, worked for me, Rick Simpson oil. I just think that's dangerous for us cancer patients, especially myeloma.
Well, especially when you're looking for hope, and when you're looking for opportunities. And so are you? Then you start doing that risk-benefit analysis in your head,
yes.
Thinking, well, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yes.
And sometimes we don't know.
With myeloma in particular. And many people are critical of Burzynski exactly for the notion of selling hope. And I intellectually understand that. The problem is myeloma patients have very few chances. People contact me all the time that are relapse refractory. They've in the beginning, we're all told about great induction therapy and great novel therapies and autologous stem cell transplant. Really what kind of isn't mentioned is after 3-5 years, there aren't too many options. I mean, you can try some heavy dose chemo triplets and quadruplets, but that falls out of the equation. So people start looking around. They hope.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think that conventional oncology falls short. In the beginning, they should be talking about, yes, some chemo, but also nutrition, lifestyle. I think everyone should be exercising. I don't think anyone argues with that.
Yeah, you're speaking our language.
Well,
you are. It's funny because, you know, Kenny and I have spoken before. Like for me, I feel sometimes depending on who your oncologist is, sometimes you feel like maybe everyone's not on the same page in terms of giving you the script of, okay, you have multiple myeloma, this is the treatment option, but it's the treatment option. They don't tell you, from my experience, nutrition, they don't tell you exercise. Like these are things, sometimes you feel like you have to use common sense, that just because you're diagnosed with this doesn't mean that it's the whole chemical outlook of it. There's other components to try to get you, you know, stable, you know. So it's just a weird thing happening.
You're absolutely right. The challenge is, and some good friends, I love telling people that my brother-in-law is a hematologist, oncologist. He and I look at the world differently. Mm-hmm. I say the world is round. He says the world, no, that's a bad analogy. Excuse me.
Yeah.
We differ. But
so your brother-in-law's flat Earth. That's what I heard.
Can you edit that out?
That's what I heard.
But actually, I use him as an example, because I love him. He's probably one of the smartest guys I know.
So he's not going to like it when he gets this.
No, he won't. Hopefully, he won't hear. But here's the thing: he won't tell patients to exercise or supplement or eat. But he's more aggressive than I am when it comes to exercise, nutrition. He's vegetarian. Sometimes heads toward vegan. He's very abstemious. He's 65.
Ooh, that's a big word.
So there's a difference for the FDA-approved, board-certified physician. They just won't talk about stuff. They can't. I think that there's some legal issues. They can't. The most they can do is say, exercise won't do any harm, or do what you want. Or some oncologists will say, it doesn't make a difference, but hey, knock yourself out.
That's interesting, because I don't know. Like, we don't really know what the thing is. I've never heard of the whole legal aspect of it. I know I'm a go-getter, so I'll just ask the questions like, look, doc, what's up? And then I'll kind of just tell you, well, this is what I'm doing. And then, as you say, it's kind of like, yeah, it doesn't hurt, do that, the healthy lifestyle, go for it. But it's just interesting for a lot of patients who are like newly diagnosed, and a lot of people who are fit before they were even diagnosed, who worked out, who had this whole thing about them in terms of exercise and nutrition. And then when you hit to the doctor's office, it's kind of like that's not part of the treatment conversation right away for
Right.
some.
Not only are you right, but based on what I've learned, to some degree, there's a little bit of a generational thing. I read your bio too. Yes, you're the ultimate entrepreneur, you're the go-getter.
Mm-hmm.
To some degree, you're sort of young and full of energy. The older patients that I talk to, generally speaking, will do exactly what their doctors say.
Yes.
My dad, since passed away, he had heart issues. If his cardiologist had told him to jump off a cliff, he would have. He adored his cardiologist.
Yeah.
That's my example of an older guy who will do anything. But younger, questioning authority, and I'm not advising patients to not do what their oncologists say.
Right.
But patients have to be their own advocate. I feel that strongly.
That's true. And when I talk to patients, the notion of it's your body, you decide what is best for you.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I think that's.
Well, I think it's maybe more than that, because I'm not saying that your decisions or thoughts or feelings about your body necessarily, or at least I don't think that's necessarily the best thing for the individual that's living with the cancer. I think that they need to listen, but they also need to advocate, and partly because there are times when there are opportunities either that the physician's not thinking of, because it happens that you're just not thinking of a thing, or the physician's not aware of. They're people. They miss things, or they're just busy. Sometimes you just move on, or a lot of the standard procedural things that are going on are actually being deferred to maybe a physician's assistant who's not actually up to date on maybe the latest clinical research. And again, it's changing so fast right now. Dear Lord, how could you not miss it? So that totally makes sense. So I guess what I'm saying by they need to advocate for themselves, basically doing what you did in 1994 or 1990, which I'm sorry,
97.
97, you advocated for yourself.
But see, I fully admit that I got lucky that at any point between 94 and 97, I could have, things could have gone differently.
Sure.
So, in fact, on the website, a lot of times I'll say, if I knew then, I wish I knew then what I know now.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of telling people that are reading, learn this stuff.
Yeah.
Nutrition.
Basic stuff. And even just the basic stuff. It gives you an opportunity, a leg up to have the discussion.
Yes. And I have to give some credit to oncologists. It is a business. It's difficult.
Sure.
They really are running. So many people turn to me and say, I had 20 minutes. I forgot why I asked questions. And I'm sympathetic to that. You only have so much time. And oncologists are running. They have a lot to contend with. Difficult. I just want conventional oncology to be only a piece of the picture. And I want you, the patient, to understand that there's this spectrum of therapies, care, all that stuff.
Right. So if I could read one thing, and this is a while ago, the American Cancer Society has made of course they have to make a public statement on this, because at least they feel like if this is sort of going to be out there anyways, they can't change that. They can't take that away from him that exists, but they know he's controversial. So they have to take a stance on this. And so, again, this was a while. In one of the articles, they and the headline in one section is, "What is the evidence?" With the claims. And so it just says some patients claim to have been helped by antineoplaston therapy. So they say exactly. So that would be Mr. David Emerson.
Yes.
But these anecdotal reports are not considered evidence of effectiveness by the medical community, either for this or for any other type of therapy. Some promising results for the use of antineoplaston therapy have been reported in small studies. Most of these studies were directed by Dr. Burzynski himself. which of course you can't do in order to, because it has to be validated by independent sources. And I believe multiple independent sources, correct, on clinical trials. And they set standards what those are, which we don't need to go into. Results from a few small studies conducted by one group of researchers in Japan have also been published. However, the available clinical evidence consists of early phase clinical trials and best case series. Are you familiar with the one in Japan, the case study in Japan?
Yes.
Okay.
General statement. Outside the U.S., people are kind of Western, much more open. A, to Burzynski, B, to non-conventional therapies. But
sure.
But keep going. So all to say, yes, he is very controversial. It's important to note that any therapy, especially chemo, doesn't work at all. There are myeloma patients who are relapsed refractory from the very beginning. That chemo just doesn't, there's no response at all. Their myeloma continues to grow. That's never discussed. It's upwards of 20%, I think, of all newly diagnosed patients. And I'm not necessarily criticizing conventional oncology. I'm just saying there's no such thing as a silver bullet cure. It's incumbent upon patients to figure out the spectrum and do as much. I advocate a shotgun approach. Do a lot of it.
Scattered approach. Well, and again, you talked about one of the things that as a negative in some ways that they were that Dr. Burzynski is giving unjustifiable hope, but is hope always bad?
It's definitely a fine line. You're absolutely right. I've talked to several things. Burzynski never turned to me and said anything about cure or anything. Again, other patients who have told me, sat in his office, and he said, this might work, it might not. I think that's fair. Likewise, conventional, and keep in mind, I'm a little bit jaded about conventional oncology because my experience wasn't great. You don't see me walking, but if you did, you'd see lots of side effects. I have lots of nerve damage and heart damage, and there are short, long-term, late-stage side effects with conventional chemo, none of which were discussed by my oncologist. The guy who managed the stem cell transplant program was gung-ho about the benefits of a stem cell transplant. There was no discussion of the side effects. At the time, there are a percentage of people that die. That's never discussed. I'm not criticizing conventional oncology. I'm just saying there's a lot. We myeloma patients newly diagnosed, we have a lot to contend with. Yes, Burzynski has strengths and weaknesses, but so does conventional oncology, strengths and weaknesses.
It's interesting. I just think about this. Both Yolanda and I also have multiple myeloma, and Yolanda's in full remission, and by conventional means. I'm not actually, by the way. So I'm still actively going on my maintenance routine every week of the old standby now, which is Revlimid. And I do
low dose Revlimid.
Yeah, 10 milligrams. So yeah, relatively. Yep.
Studies showed that your longer overall survival. You didn't ask, but I just thought I'd tell you.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. That
Revlimid is a class of drugs, anti-angiogenesis inhibitor.
Sure.
Same
so
as
technically not chemo, but right, yes.
If you were to supplement it, I can show you studies, not FDA-approved studies, but studies that say that curcumin, there are a number of supplements that enhance the efficacy of Revlimid.
Well, so far I'm right. I just had my bone marrow biopsy, my annual biopsy yesterday. No, 2 days ago. Sorry, Tuesday. Okay. I'd like to get to the point where I don't have to do this for a while. Those are not the most fun.
Yes.
I agree. But keep in mind, I work with lots of people who for years live with a little bit of myeloma in their bodies, and they're fine. As long as it's not causing bone, kidney damage.
I already had bone damage from the myeloma before, so because of course one of the things that myeloma has a tendency to do is to shut down your osteoblasts, the enzyme that builds new bone, And so it apparently did that to me for a little while. I had a couple of compression fractures and lots of holes. I'm holy now.
David, not to cut you off, Ken.
Sorry, yeah. Actually, I was going to ask you next if you would
No.
cut me off.
Thank you. David, I know you said something about, I forget how you worded it, but okay, so you had, as Kenny mentioned as well, did you have lesions?
Yeah, lytic lesions, right?
Yes. My myeloma, the main issue, I had very little blood or in urine. I was considered in the beginning non-secretory, which means I didn't secrete, which means that I had bone damage out the wazoo, mostly in my iliac crest, hips. I didn't have the little holes that you talk about, Kenny. I had the big Swiss cheese holes. A lot of bone pain.
So did they heal? Because I know you mentioned something about, it seemed like you were trying to imply that something was healed. So did your bone, did it grow back or something?
Two answers. Yes, the little ones heal. According to radiologists who've looked at lots of scans and stuff, the big ones, within the first few years, they had closed, but a couple of them hadn't closed completely. But by now, I think my bones, I work on that constantly. I think my bones are pretty good. I think they're pretty strong. I think my bones have healed. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left because I know we're going to go in. But David, can I ask you, would you be willing to do this again one day? Because I have so many questions for you, and I found just this little snippet of what you've been doing for the past 30 years, 26 years or something like that is fascinating. I really do. It's different, and it's a different thing than I think either Yolanda and I experience on a day-to-day basis, because most of what we're doing is seeing people who are in the similar circles that we are in the traditional oncology world. So I'd love to hear more about that if that's okay. Yolanda, would you be?
I'm game. But before
awesome.
we end, I would like us to kind of reel it back in terms of the nutrition aspect. We can have a conversation as well. But can you give us a little bit more about this flexitarian diet? What does that consist of?
Several things. The blog post that you're referring to specifically talking about what's called the flexitarian diet stems from an article that I read in U.S. News World Report. They rated all these the Mediterranean diet, there are a bunch of different diets. Oh. And to be honest, myeloma patients love to ask about nutrition. So what I read through this article, and I read about diabetes, and I read about all these different comorbid issues, and I decided that basically I followed the flexitarian diet and several things. The reason why it's called flexitarian diet is because it is more flexible than the other diets. Red meat is a good example. It allows a little bit of red meat, not animal fat, but animal protein. Important distinction. It does promote heavily fruits and vegetables, and that's all of us myeloma patients should be focusing on fruits and vegetables. Right. Dairy, I've never been able to find studies about dairy with respect to us. It's heatedly debated all over the internet, but you can say one thing for maybe breast cancer or prostate cancer, but I've never found a study for dairy. So the flexitarian diet and the tagline, let me make sure I get it right, progress, not perfection, which pretty much describes my way of eating. I do cheat. Right. And we live under an incurable cancer. Once in a while, my son's grown now, but when he was young, a little ice cream. I even had a donut once in a while. So I need a little. That works. Yeah.
But important question: Can you drink beer?
I don't drink beer. I drink red wine. I'm one of those people that says resveratrol in red wine is good for you. Yeah, right. But the point is yes, alcohol is toxic, but you, the patient, have to figure out, just don't overdo it in moderation.
Right.
Is this one of those risk benefit things that I can go to?
Well, yeah, I don't want to get technical on you, but yeah,
Okay.
drink too much, you increase risks. Yeah.
So every night or long term?
I can only tell you what I do. I have this game. My wife is a chef, so when there's certain meals every other night, that's how I play. I have one glass of red wine with pasta or with certain meals. That's the game I play.
And another one with the dessert? What?
No.
Just
I
one.
try to cut out sugar. I try to cut out carbs.
Okay.
Keeping your weight. You guys both look healthy. You look fine. But lots of older people that have challenges. Weight causes inflammation. That's bad.
Well, to be fair, I run probably 40 to 50 miles a week. So, and I swim and I bike, and I do that partly because I love it, partly because then I get to have the ice cream and beer. So
I can't argue with that. That's a pretty good rationale. That's pretty good. So,
yeah, I can't say that it's the best idea, but it seems to work.
As long as you're in good shape and your heart's pumping,
I don't endorse it for other people.
Exercise is also important for bone strength. If you have bone issues, exercise is your best bone strengthening therapy.
Right.
So look at it that way.
So Kenny, before we end, I have another question quick. So can you tell us briefly about your program that you help mentor cancer patients? Can you give us a little bit what that's about?
Yes, I'll try to be. I'll try to be as succinct as I can. Okay. This all stems from my own experience, fumbling around in the dark for years. So I've been studying myeloma pretty seriously for about 15 years. Boil it down to what I believe are the main issues. And there are conventional issues, the cure versus control debate. There are non-conventional issues, nutrition, and try to boil down the studies and make it as user-friendly as possible. It's a lot of information, and I don't take it personally if someone says, I fell asleep reading all the stuff. But at least it's there if people have questions. Think about there's a bone health guide. There's a newly diagnosed patient's guide. There's an elderly patient's guide. And keep in mind, all these, if you're diagnosed at either pre-myeloma or early myeloma, that's almost a different disease from late stage. A lot of bone involvement. Different therapies. Kidney, those patients that come to me that have extreme kidney involvement, there's a kidney guide. It's almost as if their focus is kidney health. Yes, a little bit myeloma, but their bones are fine. They don't need to worry about that. So the guide is supposed to attack every issue that myeloma patients have.
David, where could somebody go if they want more information about this?
Google or search people beating cancer, all one word, people beating cancer. That's the little organization I run.
Peoplebeatingcancer.org.
.org, yes.
Yeah, excellent. That's fantastic. I love it. And you do have a great story. And it's wonderful. Yolanda, thank you for making the introduction for us, because I think this is a wonderful connection, and I think this is it gives us all lots to think about. And thank you for sort of understanding that there's differences in all of us, and that this is an opportunity just to learn more about kind of what's going on out there. And something that, again, I'm unfamiliar with, and Yolanda said she is too. So thank you. And let's try to connect again very soon.
You have my email address?
I do know where you are. I know what you look like. I even have your website up in front of me now. In fact, from this conversation, I have way too many tabs open. I think that this is an opportunity for, for learning for me. Like I needed to learn something else. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
But thank you. Yolanda, anything else that you wanted to say before we say goodbye to
No,
Mr. Emerson?
I think we learned a whole lot today. I think a lot of our listeners will learn, education is the best thing when you're trying to beat multiple myeloma.
It's
So
true.
I think when people hear other stories, everything isn't conventional. Let's just hear everything. It's
Yes.
about giving patients options,
Yes.
basically.
Yes.
So this conversation, it was good.
Thank you both.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Well, thank you very much, David, Yolanda. Have an awesome rest of your day and great weekend. Let's connect sometime next week and maybe talk about some future conversations. Okay.
Yolanda, Kenny, thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Have a great day. Have a
See
great one.
you next
Bye-bye.
time. Take it
Bye.
easy.
Yay.
Yay!
That was fun.
That was nice.
That was fun. Well, Yolanda, thank you again. I think you did a wonderful job. That was a really great connection. How did you connect with David Emerson?
I think I saw his website like years ago. You know how that is. You try to like search and all of that. And I was like looking, it's funny, I was looking for someone who conversates or, a discussion with nutrition and myeloma. And I'm not really seeing that in the universe. Like it's probably out there. And there was a piece with his, outlook in terms of nutrition. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me reach out to him. So it's like one of those random things, but a little search involved with it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, I think that was a great connection. And again, we don't have to agree, as it were.
Exactly. You saw I sent you the little note, like, okay.
Yep. I mean, I know
again,
that
I was clueless to what
I knew that he was
about.
nervous about talking about it because he knew that Burzynski and the methods that they used with the antineoplastons was controversial, and again, but it's something we learned. It's something we know that's out there, and so hopefully that can help others at least make informed decisions as to what they're doing. And I guess that's really all that it amounts to. The more you know, I guess, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you. I know you've probably got a little one to take care of. I've got 2-year-olds second graders who want me to give their phones back to them so that they can have unadulterated screen time and then get back to it. But anyways, always good to see you, and we'll talk over the next couple of days.
We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye-bye.